It was one of those heavy autumn afternoons when the air smells like rust and smoke, and you can't tell if it's going to rain or just stay gray forever. I was wandering through downtown, half looking for coffee, half avoiding my own thoughts, when I saw a narrow shop squeezed between a vape store and a boarded-up diner. The sign above the door read, "Yesterday's Treasures." The gold letters were cracked and peeling, like no one had touched them in years. Inside, it smelled like dust and old perfume. The air felt thick, still. There was no music, only the hum of bad lighting and the soft rustle of hanging clothes. Coats, uniforms, faded dresses, porcelain dolls that all seemed to look straight at me. I was about to leave when I noticed something in the back corner, a rack half hidden behind an old mirror. There it hung, a ghost costume. Not the usual party kind, not white bedsheet with holes, but something older, heavier. The fabric looked yellowed, like old paper. When I touched it, it felt wrong, cold, almost waxy. The tag dangled on a thin string. Price, $6.66. I laughed. Perfect. The old man at the counter didn't laugh back. He had pale eyes and a slow, deliberate way of moving, like he'd been sitting there for a long time. When he saw what I was holding, his mouth tightened. "You shouldn't wear that before midnight." I thought it was a joke. "What, does it curse me or something?" He didn't smile. "It remembers faces." His voice was dry, almost like paper. That gave me a weird chill, but I still bought it. He bagged it fast, avoiding touching it too long, and handed it over with trembling fingers. Outside, the light was fading. The paper bag felt oddly heavy, like something inside was breathing. On the walk home, I couldn't stop replaying what he'd said. Don't wear it before midnight. My apartment was silent except for the radiator. I dropped the bag on the couch and poured myself a drink, still smirking at how dramatic the old guy had been. Midnight was hours away. What was the worst that could happen? I took the costume out. The fabric caught the light strangely, as if there was a thin layer of mist over it. When I lifted it, I thought I heard something faint, like a sigh escaping the folds. It was probably just the sound of the fabric moving. I told myself that twice. Then I slipped it on. The inside was cold, almost damp. The fabric clung to my skin like it was inhaling. When I looked up at the mirror across the room, I froze. My reflection was there, same shape, same stance, but it didn't move when I did. And then it tilted its head, just slightly, like it was studying me. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. I blinked, waved a hand. Nothing. The reflection stayed still for a moment too long, then caught up, smooth and slow, like a video buffering. I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Okay, that's creepy," I muttered. My voice sounded dull, swallowed by the room. The costume's fabric had warmed against my skin. I tried pulling it off, but it clung tighter, like static. I tugged at the edge near my neck. No zipper, no seam, no opening. The material stretched, but didn't tear. It just breathed. That was the moment a small sound came from the mirror, a kind of whisper, like someone exhaling words I couldn't quite catch. I leaned closer. Behind my reflection, the room looked darker than it really was, and something flickered in that shadowy depth. A shape, maybe, or a face trying to form. The overhead light buzzed, flickered once, and when it steadied,
My reflection had changed. The fabric around its face, my face, was tighter, smoother, like the cloth had melted into skin. I stumbled back, heart slamming, and the reflection stumbled forward just half a second behind. I turned away from the mirror, ripping at the sleeves. The costume wouldn't budge. My fingers couldn't find an edge anymore, like it had fused with me. The fabric moved with my breathing, rising and falling as if it had lungs. I ran to the kitchen sink and splashed cold water down my arms, hoping to loosen it. The water rolled right off, leaving no wet spots. Instead, I felt it under the surface, seeping inward. It was like the costume drank it. That's when I noticed the air. It had grown heavy, dense, like the walls were closer. I heard the faintest murmur again, this time not from the mirror, but from the costume itself. Just under my ribs, a low hum that matched my pulse. I said, "Stop," out loud. My voice cracked. The hum paused for a second, then answered with a sigh. I swear it sounded almost human. I looked back at the mirror. The reflection wasn't still anymore. It was moving on its own now, slowly tilting its head from side to side like it was testing the limits of my shape. Beneath the thin fabric, the suggestion of a face began to form, eyes pressing outward, a mouth shifting where mine should be. "Take it off," I whispered, more to myself than anything. My throat tightened. I grabbed a knife from the counter and tried to cut the sleeve. The blade skidded across the surface like glass. No mark, no tear. I looked up again. The reflection was smiling. Not big, not cartoonish, but just a small, patient smile. The kind someone gives when they know something you don't. I backed away until I hit the wall. My heartbeat was all I could hear. The mirror breathed with me. Then the smile widened, slow and deliberate, stretching farther than a mouth should. The light flickered again, and the last thing I saw before the room went dark was my reflection raising its hand seconds before I did. It waved.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that reflection waving, too slow, too knowing. I sat on the couch until dawn, the ghost costume still wrapped around me like a second skin. The radiator hissed, the fridge hummed, but beneath it all, I kept hearing this faint, wet sound, like fabric shifting underwater. Around sunrise, I tried again to take it off. The material had grown softer overnight, almost warm, and it pulsed gently when I touched it. I clawed at the neck, but the more I pulled, the tighter it seemed to get. My skin itched underneath, a crawling sensation that made me want to scream. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my eyes hollow, the costume clinging to every contour of my body like it was remembering me. "Okay," I said to my reflection, my voice trembling. "You're just tired. You're hallucinating. That's all." Then it answered. Not loud, barely a whisper, but the sound came from inside the costume, near my chest. It said my name. I froze. "What did you just say?" Silence. Then another whisper, closer this time, from right under my ear. It wasn't quite words at first, more like breathing shaped into meaning. "Evan." I stumbled back, slammed into the wall. The voice followed, faint but persistent, like it was brushing the inside of my skin. "Do you remember us?" I tore through my apartment, grabbing anything sharp, scissors, a box cutter, even a lighter. But nothing worked. The blade slid off the fabric. The flame only made it shimmer faintly, like heat didn't matter to it. The whispers grew louder, dozens of them, overlapping. Some sounded male,
others female. Some just moaned softly like they were trapped deep inside the material. When I pressed my hand against the fabric, I could feel shapes moving beneath, like fingers pressing back from the other side. I ran to the shower, thinking maybe water would loosen it. The second the hot stream hit me, the costume went cold again. The whispers turned into choked laughter. I looked down and saw the water beading up, sliding off like oil. But beneath the thin sheen, I could see faces. They were faint, like reflections in a dark lake. Eyes, mouths, the hint of human features twisting beneath the surface. I stumbled backward, ripping the shower curtain down with me. "Stop!" I shouted. "Stop it!" Everything went still. For a few seconds, there was nothing but my ragged breathing. Then, softly, from somewhere deep in the fabric, a single voice whispered, "Midnight." It was the same word the old man had said. The whisper faded, but the meaning stayed. The costume wasn't done with me. It was waiting. Whatever happened after midnight was what it wanted. I sat on the bathroom floor for hours, dripping water and fear, trying to think of any way to undo what I'd done. My phone buzzed once on the counter, a text from a number I didn't know. It said, "Don't let it see the mirror again." By the time evening came, I'd stopped trying to fight it. My skin was sore where the fabric clung, like it had grown roots underneath. Every movement felt heavier, slower, as if the costume was learning how to move for me. The message on my phone, "Don't let it see the mirror again," was still on the screen. I kept checking it every few minutes, half hoping the words would change or vanish. They never did, and I didn't reply. Who would I even be replying to? Around 11, the apartment lights began to flicker. The air grew colder, the smell of dust and something metallic filling the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the clock. 11:42. The whispers had quieted, but they weren't gone. They just waited. I could feel them shifting beneath the fabric, restless, like they knew what time it was. At 11:59, the hum returned, low, rhythmic, pulsing with my heartbeat. My phone screen lit up on its own. The camera opened. I saw myself on the screen, sitting perfectly still. Then, behind me, something moved, a faint shape in the corner of the room. I turned, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the phone, the shape was closer, leaning over my shoulder, its face covered in the same kind of fabric as mine. The clock struck midnight. The whispers erupted all at once. The fabric tightened like it was inhaling, pressing against my ribs until I could barely breathe. And then, slowly, I saw them, faces forming on the surface of the costume. Dozens of them, pushing outward from beneath, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. Each one had different eyes. One pair looked directly at me from the curve of my chest. Another blinked from the sleeve near my wrist. The voices were clearer now, begging, pleading, overlapping until it was one endless sound of despair. "Please, let us out," one of them whispered. I stumbled to the mirror before I could stop myself. My reflection looked wrong again. Too tall, too thin. The faces on the fabric moved differently in the reflection, like they were separate from me. They were smiling. And then, one by one, they turned their eyes toward me, every single face, until all I could see in the glass were hundreds of pupils staring straight through me. The room seemed to fold inward. The walls breathed. Somewhere behind me, a knock echoed. 3 slow taps. I froze. The faces turned toward the sound, their mouths twisting open. Another knock, louder.
I stepped backward until I hit the door. My hand reached for the handle on its own, but when I touched it, something on the other side pressed back, soft, warm, like a hand covered in cloth. The faces on me all grinned at once. I yanked my hand away, heart slamming, and shouted, "Who's there?" The answer came from every direction, layered and wrong, the same voice split 100 times. "We are." The lights went out.
When the lights came back, it was morning. I don't remember falling asleep. Maybe I passed out. The air smelled burnt, like ozone after lightning. My phone was dead, the battery completely drained. The faces on the fabric were gone, smooth again, quiet, like nothing had happened. But my skin still tingled where their mouths had pressed. I needed help. The only person who knew anything was that old man from the thrift store. Maybe he could tell me what this thing was, how to undo it. I pulled on a jacket to hide the costume and left as soon as the sun rose. The streets were empty, washed in pale light. Every window I passed seemed to reflect me differently, sometimes taller, sometimes thinner. I tried not to look. My reflection in the glass doors of the convenience store was smiling even when I wasn't. When I finally reached the alley, my stomach dropped. The thrift shop wasn't there. In its place was a boarded-up storefront with cracked windows and a faded for-lease sign. The door was sealed with planks so old they looked fossilized. I just stood there, gripping the handle that wasn't there anymore. A man sweeping outside the vape shop looked over. "Hey," I called. "What happened to the store here? Yesterday's treasures?" He frowned. "Never heard of it." "It was right here," I insisted. "There was an old guy, gray hair, blue eyes." The man shook his head. "Buddy, that place been empty for as long as I've worked here, at least 10 years. He went back to sweeping. I stepped closer to the door and saw something behind the dusty glass. Movement, a faint shadow slipping out of sight. For a second, I thought I heard the bell above the door jingle, just like before. I pressed my face to the glass. The inside was dark, but something white hung in the middle of the room. Another costume, identical to mine. I stumbled back. The boards didn't look so old anymore. They were fresh, nailed cleanly, like someone had put them up just last night. My paper bag, the one I'd brought the costume in, was still in my pocket. I pulled it out. The logo was gone. The paper felt brittle, like it had aged decades overnight. As I watched, the letters faded completely, leaving nothing but plain brown. That's when the whispers came back. Not loud this time, just one voice close to my ear. "You brought it home." I spun around. The street was empty. No one there but me. Something cold brushed against my ankle. I looked down. A piece of white fabric fluttered across the pavement, catching the wind, dragging itself toward the alley like it knew the way back. I didn't follow it. I ran. When I reached my building, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely fit the key in the lock. I slammed the door behind me, leaned against it, gasping. The whisper followed me into the quiet. "You can't return what already belongs."
The next morning, my apartment smelled strange, damp and metallic, like wet pennies. I thought at first maybe a pipe had burst, but when I checked the walls and floor, everything was dry. Then I noticed the stains. They started small, grey smudges on the sleeves of the costume, darker in some spots, shaped almost like fingerprints.
I tried scrubbing them off in the sink, but the harder I rubbed, the deeper they seemed to sink in, until the fabric drank the water and pulsed faintly under my hands. I slept on the couch that night, but even then I felt it move. Every time I drifted close to sleep, the costume seemed to shift with my breathing, tightening, loosening, almost like it was matching my heartbeat. Once I woke up because I heard whispering again, low, right beside my ear. Only this time it wasn't words. It sounded like someone quietly laughing. By the second day, the stains had spread. They weren't smudges anymore, but full impressions, hands, palms pressed flat against the fabric from the inside. Some larger than mine, some smaller. When I touched them, the fabric felt warm, like skin under a thin layer of ice. I avoided mirrors completely. I covered the big one in the hallway with a blanket, turned the smaller ones face down. Still, I could feel eyes on me. When I walked past reflective surfaces, the microwave door, the black screen of my TV, I'd catch glimpses of motion that didn't match mine. Just a flicker, like someone standing half a second behind me. That evening, as the sun went down, I noticed new stains on the walls, pale gray handprints trailing along the hallway like someone had walked there in the dark. My first thought was that I'd somehow done it myself, but the hands were too small, too many. I tried washing them off, but the paint underneath peeled, revealing more, older ones, layered like fossil marks. The further I cleaned, the more there were. The whispers grew bolder after that. They didn't stay inside the costume anymore. I could hear them in the apartment now. Soft breaths slipping through vents, sighs from behind doors. One voice stood out, quiet but distinct. "We know the way home." That night I dreamed of the thrift store, the bell over the door, the dusty air, the flickering lights. The old man was there, sitting behind the counter, but when he lifted his head, I saw my own face under that pale skin. I woke up gasping, the air in my apartment cold enough to fog my breath. There were fresh stains on the ceiling above me, gray streaks like something had been crawling there. I stood frozen for a long time, just listening. The whispers had stopped, but the silence wasn't empty. It felt full, alive. Then, from the far corner of the room, the old paper bag stirred on its own, slowly, like something breathing inside it. By the next evening, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I needed someone, anyone, to see what was happening. Maybe if another person witnessed it, it would become real enough to explain. I called my friend, Mia. She answered on the second ring, tired but smiling. "Hey, stranger, you alive?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like the room was swallowing it. "Can you do me a favor? Just stay on video for a minute." She frowned. "What's wrong?" "Just look." I propped the phone on the counter, stepped back so she could see me. The costume was still on, hidden under my hoodie, but the fabric moved faintly when I breathed. I tried to act normal, to smile. Her expression changed almost instantly. She squinted at the screen. "Evan, where are you?" "At home." "Why?" Her eyes darted across the screen. "I don't see you. I see your apartment, but—" She paused. "You're not there." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean I'm not there? I'm right—" She flinched. "Something just moved behind you." I spun around. Nothing. Just the dark hallway and the blanket draped over the mirror. When I turned back, the call had frozen. The last frame showed Mia staring into the camera, mouth open like she was about to scream. Then the screen went black. I tried calling again, but my phone wouldn't connect. Every app, every contact, gone. Just a blank screen with my reflection faintly visible on the dark glass. Only the reflection wasn't still. It was breathing. I turned the phone face down and sat on the floor. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The fabric under my sleeves felt alive, twitching like muscles that weren't mine. That's when the TV flickered on by itself. The screen showed my living room, but from a higher angle, like a camera looking down from the ceiling. There was no sound, only a faint hum. In the image, I was standing near the couch, even though I was sitting on the floor. The other me was moving, head tilted, body swaying slightly like a puppet testing its strings. The costume showed clearly now, white, seamless, glowing faintly from within. The other me turned its head toward the camera. The moment our eyes met, the TV shut off with a soft click. Silence again. Then my phone vibrated. No caller ID, just one message. Don't look away this time. The lights in the apartment dimmed, flickering once. I looked up, and there it was, standing in the doorway. The same figure from the TV, its face smooth, featureless, except for a faint outline of eyes pressing through the cloth. It tilted its head, mirroring me exactly. Then, from behind the fabric, I heard my own voice whisper back, "I told you not to show anyone." After that night, I stopped leaving the apartment. The figure appeared and disappeared at random, sometimes in the hallway, sometimes standing at the edge of my vision when the lights flickered. It never moved while I watched, but I could feel it inch closer each time I blinked. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. My reflection was gone from every surface. Even when I tried taking photos of myself, the pictures came out empty, just an impression of light where my body should be. On the third day, I started digging online. I searched everything I could think of: haunted costume, cursed clothing, ghost suit. Most of it was garbage, but one post caught my attention. It was buried deep on an old paranormal forum, time-stamped over a decade ago. The title read, "The Tailor of Spirits." The story described a man who made costumes for the dead. According to the post, he collected burial cloths from forgotten cemeteries and turned them into ceremonial garments meant to hold echoes of the departed. He believed the souls of the unacknowledged would cling to the fabric, craving the warmth of a living body to remember themselves again. The post mentioned that his last creation, a ghost costume made from 7 burial shrouds, was never found after the tailor's death. Locals claimed it vanished the same night his workshop burned down. My pulse hammered as I scrolled. The address listed for his old shop matched the block where yesterday's treasures had been. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, my reflection flickering faintly over the words. Behind my head, I thought I saw another silhouette appear for a split second. When I turned, the room was empty, but the air smelled faintly of smoke, like burned fabric. I searched the tailor's name next, Marin Lyle, and found an archived newspaper clipping. The photo was grainy, but clear enough to make my blood run cold. The man in the picture was the same one who'd sold me the costume. The article said he died in 1979. My computer screen began to glitch. horizontal lines tearing across the image, faces flickering in the static. I reached out to shut it off, but the monitor flared white, and for a split second I saw words scrawled across it in what looked like ash. You wore it before midnight. Then the power cut out. I sat in the dark, shaking, trying to breathe. My phone screen lit up by itself, the camera opening again. This time there was no delay. Just my empty apartment, the couch, the window, the faint outline of something standing right behind where I sat. A whisper brushed my ear, almost gentle. I don't know what day it was when I finally decided to end it. The costume had become part of me, literally. My skin underneath looked pale and waxy, veins fading like ink and old paper. When I pressed my fingers into my arm, the surface rippled faintly, as if I were touching water through fabric. I barely ate, I barely thought. The whispers never stopped now. They filled the rooms, my head, even the space between my breaths. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they cried, but mostly they just whispered one word over and over: burn. So that's what I decided to do. I dragged myself to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and soaked a towel in it. My hands trembled, but it was the first clear thought I'd had in days. I opened every window, lit a match, and pressed the flame to my sleeve. The fire caught instantly, but it didn't hurt. The fabric didn't burn like normal cloth. It glowed bright white, lighting up the entire room. The whispers turned to screams, not from pain, but from something that sounded almost like release. The flames climbed higher, tracing my outline. The costume peeled away in long, curling ribbons of light. For a moment, I saw faces in the glow, hundreds of them, swirling upward, fading as they rose. Then came the silence. When the light faded, I was still standing. My clothes were gone, my skin untouched. But I wasn't alone. The air shimmered faintly, and shapes moved in the haze, translucent forms like afterimages burned into reality. One of them stepped forward. It had no face, but somehow I knew it was him, the old man from the store. His presence carried that same cold calm, that same stillness. "You tried to burn it," he said. His voice wasn't sound but thought, vibrating directly in my chest. "You tried to burn it, but you can't destroy what keeps you." I shook my head. "I don't want this. Take it back." "You are it now. You took their place." I looked down. My skin wasn't skin anymore. It shimmered faintly in the dim light, thin and pale, like stretched fabric. When I touched my chest, I didn't feel warmth, just emptiness. The old man reached out and touched my shoulder. His fingers passed through me like mist. "You burned the shell, but not the soul that wears it." And then he was gone. The apartment smelled of smoke and something sweet, like old perfume. The curtains swayed though no wind came through. I stared at my reflection in the black screen of the TV. It wasn't my face anymore. The eyes looking back were smooth, blank, almost peaceful. The faintest smile touched the featureless mouth. For the first time in days, the whispers were silent. Then, quietly, one voice spoke from somewhere deep inside. The shop reopened a month later. No one remembered when or how. It just appeared one morning on the same narrow street,
Lights on, sign freshly painted, yesterday's treasures gleaming like new. Inside, everything was as it had been. The faint smell of lavender and dust, the shelves stacked with forgotten things, the soft hum of a flickering light in the corner. Behind the counter stood a young man with pale gray eyes. His hands were steady now. His smile was calm, almost kind. If you didn't look too closely, you'd think he was just another quiet shopkeeper in another quiet town. He never spoke unless spoken to. When customers came in, he'd greet them politely, ring up their purchases, wish them a nice day. Most never noticed the strange chill in the air, or how the mirrors inside the shop never showed anyone but him. One evening, close to Halloween, a boy wandered in, a little drunk, laughing to himself. He was looking for something cheap for a costume party. He poked around the racks until he reached the back corner, where a single garment hung on a hook, white, seamless, soft as fog. The boy touched it and smiled. "Perfect," he said. "How much?" The shopkeeper didn't answer right away. He looked down at the counter, then at the boy, then at the clock on the wall. "$6.66, he said finally. The boy chuckled. "Weird number." The shopkeeper nodded, folding the fabric neatly into a brown paper bag. When he handed it over, their fingers brushed for a second. The boy flinched. The man's hand was cold as marble. At the door, the boy turned and laughed. "Hey, got any care instructions for this thing?" The shopkeeper's pale eyes lifted slowly. His voice was quiet but clear. "Don't wear it before midnight." The bell above the door chimed as the boy left, and for a moment the shopkeeper stood perfectly still, listening to the fading echo. Then he smiled faintly to himself, an expression that didn't quite reach his eyes, and looked toward the back corner of the shop, where the shadows swayed like curtains in a silent breeze. "Another one," he murmured. And behind the counter, faint and almost invisible, the fabric under his skin shifted.